So in this video, I want to talk about the difference between buying traditional single family real estate where you rent to one single renter and then buying houses where you're absolutely renting by the room, which this makes a huge difference and is an absolute huge difference between the two. So traditionally, people have been taught to this is for just your classic real estate investor that goes out, buys property, buys a house, buys a property, and wants to make money, essentially build long-term wealth and create cash flow. These investors tend to buy traditional properties and do a traditional rental strategy, which is buy property, put a tenant into the property, and rent it out and look for cash flow. And of course, this does have incredible advantages. But fundamentally speaking, when you buy a property and you look to rent it out, yes, you are looking for some rental cash flow, but primarily you're looking to cover the note. You're looking to get some cash flow in, maybe $200-300 a month, and to cover the note. Because when people buy traditional real estate and buy traditional property and put a tenant in there, they're really looking for equity. Equity comes through appreciation, buying below market value. They're looking to create wealth. The equity is the wealth, the juice that's in the deal. So when they buy that property, they're looking for cash flow, but they're looking for value. That spread from what they bought it for and what the value is. So by creating that, they're looking for that juice in the deal. And then they're also looking for cash flow. So you have the equity, how much spread is in there, the value from what you bought it for to what it's now worth. And of course, appreciation makes that go up, and paying off the mortgage makes the debt go down. So that's always increasing more equity and creating more equity for you. But then the other part to this is the cash flow, putting a tenant in there and creating rents coming for that property. And that's really what I want to talk about. The difference between cash flowing a property from a single renter and with one tenant. So this might be a family, husband and wife and 2 kids. We'll just call it the traditional nuclear family that's in there, versus, ta-da, my favorite, renting out by the room. So versus taking that same property and breaking it down and renting by the room. So there are just some real clear advantages to renting by the room that just shoots by a long shot. Now, the truth is that everyone I know rents by the room, that rents properties by the room, rarely ever goes back to renting to one person, because the economics makes no sense for you to rent by one person. It's just a losing deal across the board. So I want to go over a couple of points of why there is such a difference. So let's just talk about renting out to one person, where the advantages and the disadvantages are. So when you get a traditional house, rent to that nuclear family I just talked about, the husband and wife, the 2 kids, you're looking for, of course, the appreciation, but you're looking for cash flow to come in from the renter. But remember, if your mortgage is, let's just say on a property that costs you, let's just say a $250,000 property, your mortgage is going to easily be about $2,000 per month, between $1,800 to $2,000 per month. Could even be $2,100 a month in these times of high interest. So again, very rarely are you making more than a couple $100 profit, if you're making that at all. People that go into buying single family properties that are looking for cash flow, when you look at your mortgage, what you pay for the property, especially if you're paying for it at current market rates. By the way, the average house in the United States costs about $450,000. It's the highest it's ever been. If you're looking at paying off your mortgage, paying taxes, paying insurance, you look at maintenance, you look at vacancy rates, and you're trying to clear more than $2,000 a month. In most markets, that's going to be very difficult. Most markets, a house is going for maybe on the high end $2,500, on the low end about $1,400 in rent. So for you to make that additional $200 per month, it's going to be a huge hurdle. So the idea here is that when you buy a property, you're looking to rent it out, you're looking to make a couple of $100 a month positive cash flow. That works out to be about $2,400 per year. And again, that's if you get to that point. One of the biggest obstacles, and I've been in the real estate business for over 30 years, one of the biggest obstacles that landlords run into who are renting owners, and this could be a nurse, a teacher, anyone that buys a property, rents it out. There could be a couple that move to another house and the original house is being rented out now. One of the issues that they run into is that they have rent to one person, and they're relying on that one person to be able to make that mortgage payment, that rent payment month after month after month after month after month. And that's where it just gets absolutely difficult, and they run into trouble. Because again, that person can lose their job, that person can get sick, that person can just decide not to pay. These are all fundamental aspects that can have you in problems with that tenant, getting cash from that tenant because you're dependent on one family to really, or in many cases, depends on what part of the market you're in, it could be one individual that's paying that rent and that's paying that income. By the way, in a lot of C&D markets, it's really one it can be very often be a single mother with 3 kids paying that rent, and really you're looking for that person to consistently be able to produce that rent for you to have continual cash flow coming in, which when you're renting, anything happens. People lose their jobs right now in record numbers. They're talking about due to the advent of AI and certain policies that are taking place on a political level, as well as just the evolution of just the job market, people are losing jobs in record numbers. The day of stability for a tenant is just no longer here. Versus when you compare this to renting out by the room, if that house has 4 rooms, and I'm not even talking about if you're converting a living room into a room, if you're talking about converting the dining room into a room, if you're talking about converting all these other spaces, attics, basements, we're just talking about 4 rooms. If you have just 4 rooms, if your house is getting you, let's just say, $1,800 a month, and you have 4 rooms, that's 8, 16, 24, that's $3,200 a month. So if you have a house with 4 rooms, and you're getting $800 per room, and you have 4 rooms, well, you're getting $3,200 per month. So you're talking about $1,400 more than you would that traditional rental. You have 4 rooms, $800 per room. That's 8, 16, 24. That's 32. That's $3,200 versus, let's just say you're renting out the house for $1,800. Now, when you start talking about that type of difference of $1,400, you're talking about literally almost $18,000 per year. And at $18,000 per year extra, that's extra. That's not that's extra. You're making $18,000 more than you would have originally made with that single property. And that's where these differences are, because you are not only making more money, but you're not relying on one tenant. You have multiple units that are rented. So if you're renting by the room, you have $800 per room. You have multiple rooms that are actually creating cash flow. You're not reliant on just one tenant. And again, if you look at the major professionals that are people that really make money in real estate, people that really explode, REITs, we're talking about everything from institutional investors to REITs to private equity, to some major players in real estate that buy multifamilies. They don't buy a single property. They go into situations where there's a multiple unit structure of cash flow coming in. You have multiple units of cash flow coming in. You're not reliant on just one unit. And again, the original point was anything can happen with that one unit. So if you have 4 rooms, someone's out of work, someone gets sick, someone gets laid off, or someone just decides not to pay, and you have 4 basic rooms, now you're out of that one individual, but now you have 3 other rooms paying you cash flow. So in this case, if it's $800 per room, that's 800 times 3, 8, 16, 24. That's still $2,400 coming in, while you're waiting for the other rooms to while you're waiting for that other room to get rented. So you're not relying on one person. One of the biggest things that people don't understand is that with a single family property, the traditional property you buy, you rent to one individual. Again, if that person moves out and that property is vacant for, let's just say, 1 month, well, that wipes out your profits. So the positive cash flow, if you were trying to make a $200 a month positive cash flow, which is typically what, actually people don't even make positive cash flow. Statistically, they don't even succeed in the positive cash flow area. But let's say you're getting $200, a real $200 after taxes, insurance, delinquency, maintenance, mortgages. Let's say you're making $2,400 per year, $200 per month equals $2,400 per year. If you're vacant just 1 month, most of those profits are gone. And you could easily be vacant 1 month. You could be vacant 1 month just by one tenant leaving and another tenant moving in. You could easily be, it doesn't have to be where someone's not paying. You could just be transitioning to a new tenant. But the point is, you're, again, relying on those funds. And again, with the multi-unit, you're not locked into any one individual. Now, here's another point about the difference between shared room, renting by the room, and one property. This is my favorite part of it as well too. When you rent by your traditional property and rent to that nuclear family, that one individual, and I'll keep using the nuclear family as an example. When you're renting to that one single individual, that's it. The whole house is rented. The garage is rented. The attic is that one person controls that whole property. So you're not able to create any other additional revenue within that property. That property creates no additional revenue. There's no additional revenue coming in. You're locked in with that one renter in that one structure. There's no way to move upward. So again, you can have a 3,000 square foot house in Atlanta, which of course in Atlanta, that's great to have a 3,000 square foot house in Atlanta. And that's it. All that space is being used by that one family you rented to. Versus when you go into shared housing, co-living, rented by the room, that same 4-bedroom model we're talking about. Well, yeah, you have the 4 bedrooms rented, but what if you have a basement? That's the footprint of the house. You have a 3,000 square foot house. Let's say it's 1,500 square feet on each level. You have a basement that could be 1,500 square feet. 1,500 square feet, you could create literally 5, 6, 7 rooms in that space and literally create for yourself, as we said, 3,200, 3,200 for the 4 bedrooms. But if you create, let's just say 5 bedrooms in the basement, you're picking up another $4,000 a month. 8 times 5 is 4,000 per month. So you get another $4,000 per month just from the basement alone. $4,000 per month for that basement, that's $48,000 per year. So you have the 4 bedrooms upstairs that are creating that $3,200 per month, where you're still making positive cash flow upstairs, but in the basement, you're generating another $48,000 to $50,000 per year. This is what we call magic money. We call that free money, magic money, because again, out of this house, you have multiple rooms that you just simply built out. And by the way, my YouTube channel, you'll see us building out multiple rooms in properties, multiple rooms in the basement of that house. And right there in that basement, if you can create just 5 bedrooms, and really you create more than that. I'm just giving you on the low end. You're creating extra almost $50,000 per year just from 5 bedrooms. Now, again, these are all opportunities that come from the advantages of having multiple rooms and multiple rooms in a property. A single family property, you can't do that. You're locked into that one space. You're locked into that one area. That renter controls the whole game. Here, you want it where you can create other spaces. So now we're not even just talking about the basement. We're talking about, what about the attic? We talked about that in my last video. What about the attic? Turn the spaces there. What about garages? What about walk-in closets, laundry rooms? Every space is a move upward. So you have houses where literally you're able, by making some basic adjustments, where the house itself is bringing in, could be bringing $80,000, $90,000 per year from one house. And when you look at where your debt service on that house your debt service, maintenance, and all the expenses on that house might be $20,000 per year. You're talking about $60,000 a year in true passive income. Now, we're not even talking about the appreciation from the values of the house itself, which we're going to discuss in other videos, of that property values that go up. We're not even talking about the value from the rents increasing every 6 months. Rents go up between 5 and 10%. By the way, rents are going down in the general market, but in the room space, that's where everyone's coming to. They're coming to the space to rent rooms because of the economics of more expensive rentals, which we'll just save for another time. But be sure that the room rental segment of the market is absolutely exploding. There's just no question about that. It is absolutely exploding. So the idea here now is that you have multiple rooms creating multiple spaces that are there, and you're able to create multiple units of cash flow. Now, let's talk about another difference between renting out by the house and renting out by the room. So let's talk about renting by the room. By traditional house, you're going to put a person on a lease, and you're going to hold the person for long term. They come in to rent the house, they sign a lease, they're there for a long period of time, a year. Generally, a typical residential lease is a year. So the thing here, which really makes it interesting, is that when you rent and your tenant signs a lease, again, if you're renting property, you're dealing with tenants, and to create value and getting your best deals, you're going to be in C and D markets. That's where the money is. So those are the type of tenants you work with. These are working class tenants, anywhere from an Uber driver to a nurse's aide to somebody that works in construction to it could be somebody that's an assistant manager at Target, to people that get supportive housing services. But the point is that you're in a lease for, let's just say, a year. Your tenant has a lease there. If that tenant stops paying, or there's an issue with collecting money from that tenant, or that tenant is damaging the property, those tenants have a lease, and it is very difficult to get them out. And when I say very difficult, it just means you have to go through a legal process most of the time. 90% of the time, you're going to go to court. There's going to be a legal process most of the time. And again, it's also harder for the tenant to come out. A tenant's not paying. The rent. They don't want to pay the rent. So again, this is a very real issue for landlords that deal in these markets when they have these issues. When they actually do have them, not only does the tenant not paying rent, but the tenant has psychological dominion over the property. They feel like it's theirs. They've been there so long. They are literally raising kids there. Their families there. They know the neighbors. They're not so inclined to leave. They feel like it's theirs. They feel like it's their property. They feel like this is their property. So they're not so inclined to just get, not only that, their furniture is there. It costs money to leave. It actually costs money to leave. The furniture's there. They're there. It's just a harder thing for them to leave emotionally, financially. They're locked in. This is home for them. Versus when you're renting rooms, well, people that rent rooms, let's just start with some fundamental basics. Number one, their furniture's not there. We rent furnished rooms. When you do a shared housing, co-living property, you're actually renting by the room. So you supply the furniture. They're coming in, and they're coming into a furnished room. So not only that, but they know it's not their furniture. They come in, it's easy, we call it plug and play. They could just come in and move in. On top of that, unlike with if you rent to that individual, and remember that control that they feel over the property, that dominion, well, with shared housing is different. You walk in, other people live there, it's a community, you see other people coming in and out. You know it's shared housing. You know that when you walk in. They know that they walk in. They know it's shared housing. This is not something that I control at any deep level. This is I'm just renting a room, right? I'm just renting a room. This is not my house. This is not my property. I don't control. They see a different person. You may rent out to someone else. They see another person come in. They may see a different person come back through. They know this is not their property. So by them knowing that, and by them being able to realize that in their mind, psychologically, they don't have that control. So if there's a situation, I'm saying that to say, if there's a situation where you need them to leave, you want them to leave, they're way more inclined to actually leave the property. By the way, none of my landlords have ever been to court. We do property management and smart rooms. None of my landlords have ever been to court. Landlords for rooms rarely go to court. The reason they go to court is because they generally tell tenants, hey, look, this is not working. I'm going to need for you to leave. And tenants generally say, give me a week or so and you can leave. This is most times. Of course, there are those exceptions, but we really just, explain this is not working out, you gotta go. And tenants understand that because it's a very fluid situation. Landlords believe that, hey, you should lock, I tell landlords all the time that want to lock tenants in with a lease. Hey, you don't need to lock a tenant in with a lease. You don't want to lock a tenant in with a lease because, again, they're committed just like you're committed to that lease. You want to let a tenant go if they want to go, and you want to tell them to leave when you want them to leave because there's such a demand for rooms in this country that you replace the tenant like that. There's a waiting list. Everyone has a waiting list for tenants. No one's fighting for tenants because there's just so many, and the market is absolutely exploding because of the economy, because of where the market is today. So again, that's where the advantages are because again, you're not locked into a situation, you're in high demand, and you're not locked in where one tenant is absolutely controlling the property. So another advantage to renting by the room is just the overall longevity of the property. So people believe that, not all people, but a lot of people believe that renting by the room, tenants put a lot of wear and tear on the property. That couldn't be furthest from the truth. Most furnished room rentals, well, let me back up. Let me actually position the point this way. People who rent their properties and rent their houses tend to rent to that family. That nuclear family that we just talked about, mom, dad, 2 kids. And their thought, and they rent, and when they rent out, they have the kids there, they may have a dog there, they have those kids there, they have relatives come in and out of there, they do parties there, they do family events there. That's what takes the wear and tear on the property. Young children coming in, banging up the property, going through walls, literally going through walls, dogs up and down the property, scratching up the walls. This is what actually takes the wear and tear, actually impacts the property and damages the property. You have more people in that space going in and out of there, and they're not keeping the property up. That's what damages the property. Not only that, but talking about damage to the property as well too, tenants that live there and have that dominion there have the property tend to have it closed off. So you may do a maintenance call and you may do a check, but you really don't have, as a landlord, that general access in and out of that property. So there's a lot of damage you really don't even see, just the general wear and tear on the property, where you just don't see. So when you look at kids, animals, families, parties, these elements, these factors contribute to the damage of that property. And very often the landlords don't see it. You know, tenant may move out 5 years later, 10 years later, landlord looks and says, wow, this property needs to be renovated. Versus when you're renting by the room and you're doing shared housing, you're generally renting to adults. These are people that are grown, these are adults, they're coming in and out, they go to work, they lead their daily life, they're coming in and out of there. They're not creating any wear and tear on the property at that level, simply because they're grown, simply because they go to work, they come back in, they're just not in the property at that level. Matter of fact, I tell people all the time, don't put TVs in the living room, because if you don't put a TV in the living room, they'll never go in the living room. So they're not in the living room, they're not in the properties, they're not in the property, they're working, they're single people. You don't allow kids, you don't allow pets for the most part. Most renters are not allowing kids, they're not allowing pets. So you're not getting the wear and tear on the property, because they're not, again, these properties have no smoking in them. Someone that has their own house, you can't stop them from smoking in it. They have as a renter, an individual renter. Here with the rooms, you can have a set of rules that allows you to make sure that these types of factors are not involved. No kids, no pets, no smoking. Not only that, because it's a communal environment and it's a community set up in these properties, you're able to come in and out of the properties to be able to see what type of damage is there. You actually walk in, because it's a community property. People are constantly walking in. You get one of the tenants give you a video of the property, because it's just a full access open environment. What about another tenant letting you know if there's anything going on in the property that should not be? You're allowed to do that. You can put cameras in the common areas of the property. You can see what's going on in the property, which is a great tool for management and a great tool for managing what's going on in that property. So this allows you to have a real dynamic of control of the property, maintaining your property, and again, you just don't have that impact of people just running the property the way they choose to. If you rent to an individual person, how they choose to do it. Again, here you're creating a set of rules, of guidelines that you're able to monitor and to make sure that are being enforced. And this allows you to have that control over the property that you're looking for, to make sure that the property stays in great shape, stays in great condition across the board. And again, I want to touch back base. I had touched base on this before, but I do want to touch back base on this again. Income. The income factor, and overall the income factor. Generally speaking, when you look at the fact that you don't have the expense, that your mortgage stays the same. So if you have a traditional property, let's just say the mortgage is $1,800. You have the same property in shared housing, the rent is $1,800. One property, you might be making $2,400 a year in positive cash flow, because you're making an extra $200. In a shared housing co-living, you may have the basement build out, you may have the attic build out, you may be making a positive cash flow of $50,000 a year. Just think about that. $2,400 a year. Here you make up to $50,000 a year. And of course, that's if you're building out rooms in the basement, and to what degree you're having the rooms built on that in that other space. But the point is, the potential is there on these properties to be able to make that dramatic increase in what you're making in terms of net profit to your bottom line off of these properties. Same properties, same debt service, same mortgage payment, and again, you're seeing a huge difference in what those profits really are. So that's why shared housing is so explosive, because of the opportunities that lie in shared housing, where again, it puts you in the multi-unit cash flow game without you having to buy apartment buildings, without you having to expand into that area. But the houses that you have full access to become a multi-unit cash cow. And again, there's opportunity for you to increase that cash flow and increase that return. So this is just a video that I hope was insightful. Please be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and give me a thumbs up on this. The idea here, though, is that you really want to understand why you're getting into shared housing, the understanding of the opportunities in renting by the room. Co-living, make no mistake about it, is the way to go. If you want to book a call, go to www.smartrooms.com, or you can always give me a call at 404-951-3737, 951-3737. Everyone reaches out to me. And again, I hope this video was insightful, and I'll see you at the next video.